when you find a purpose or something that is beyond the day-to-day that's driving your work, if you can figure out what this is, man, you're just going to have so much more life satisfaction and joy. And that's like, I mean, that's what we're here for, right?
Welcome to Beyond the Ping Pong Table, the podcast that delves deep into the heart of innovative workplace cultures that put people first. I'm your host, Tabrizi, and today I'm excited to host a dynamic duo from Venturous Counsel, a mission-driven firm championing underestimated startups and investors. We have Aravinda Seshadri, the founding partner, a super lawyer's rising star for 7 consecutive years, whose diverse legal background and Stanford Law School credentials have made her an advocate for diversity, especially through her work with the Asian American Bar Association and various forums supporting women of color. Alongside her is Michael Young, managing partner whose journey from Kokomo, Indiana to the San Francisco Bay Area's legal landscape has seen him provide pivotal guidance to startups. His extensive experience, especially with Afghan translators, complements his life outside the law as a climate activist, musician, and yoga instructor. Join us as we explore Aravinda and Michael's journey and the impact of their collaborative efforts in fostering inclusive and empowering environments in the startup world. Welcome.
Awesome.
That's such a nice intro. Thank you. I also need to type all of that down and put it on our website, which we're all.
I can provide the transcript. Yeah. It's all good.
I love it.
So good. It's so good. Okay.
So Michael and I go back about 12 years with Night Train. Michael is the lead guitarist and Ashton vocals and guitar. So we go way back. And I
think of myself as the band mom.
Yes. Oh, I call you that continuously.
Yeah.
And I'm Ashton's secretary. all correspondence have to go through through me because Ashton doesn't respond to anything. So anyways, so I've known Michael for quite a bit. But I had the pleasure to meet you, Aravinda, at his daughter's 2nd birthday a couple of weeks ago, where we were all karaokeing to Smashing Pumpkins. And I thought
awesome. You
guys would be a great duo to have on the podcast. So I'm really excited to have you guys here.
Thank you so much for inviting us. And I love the concept. I love the idea. And just the more we can get this concept of a different perspective around work out there, I feel like people's lives are going to be improved.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I want to take it back. Quick little icebreaker question for both of you. What was your first job?
Oh, I have a good one.
Yes.
I am lifelong vegetarian. My first job, maybe I had some babysitting gigs before, but my first job was at McDonald's because as a 14-year-old, other people will not hire you because they have to comply with child labor laws and you have to clock in and clock out and take 10-minute breaks every 2 hours. And nobody wants to deal with it, but McDonald's cannot be choosy. So they will deal with it. And I will say I had a manager there who had severe anger management problems and was absolutely terrifying. And I honestly think that my fearlessness in life is I survived that as a 14-year-old, know nothing. So what, how you think you're going to scare me now? Good luck, people.
Yeah. I got law school in the bag. What about you, Michael? When did you have your first job?
Yeah, it's true. So I also did several tours of duty in food service, and I think everyone should. I think you should, especially if you're going to eat at a restaurant, you should have had to work in one so that you know how to behave. But so back in the 80s and 90s, it was legal somehow for kids who were 10 or 11 to pass newspapers. You could have a job working for the local newspaper. So
you're a paper boy?
I was a paper boy, but I got 2 routes that were conjoined. And I got to tell you, I was pulling down at the age of 10, $60 a week in the clear. I will never be as rich as I was at 10 years old. Can you imagine 1991, you're 10 years old, you have no expenses and you just have
no responsibility,
none whatsoever. And you just got $250 a month just tumbling in. My friends would come over to the house and look around my room and be, must be nice to have rich parents. I'm like, nah, man, my parents are broke. This is mine.
I worked for this. Oh my God, I love it. This has been like my favorite question of the whole interview because I've gotten such wild answers.
It's a good question.
Yeah,
That's a really good one. I like it.
All right, cool. So let's talk about when you guys first met. That was at Silicon Legal Strategy, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, we heard angels sing right away. Just looked into each other's eyes and we knew.
Tell me more about your experience there. How many years you were there and what that work environment was.
Well, I was there first, so I'll talk about it first. So Andre is the founder of the firm, and I started out my legal career at Orrick, Harrington and Sutcliffe, where we both worked together. Then he left to start his own thing, and I was on the other side of a deal. And he was like, "Oh, this person knows what's up, even though they're pretty junior." And so he recruited me to join his law firm, and I was one of the first attorneys that joined there. And yeah, it was formative in that we were really departing from the big law firm mold of really paying all the attention to the large startups that have a lot of money and then not equipping the juniors with any resources or time or training, and having them service all of the smaller startups and just like do whatever you can, figure it out. So it was nice to be at a firm that was really focused on early stage startups and had that as the point rather than sort of almost an afterthought, as most big law firms do.
Yeah, my journey was a little different in that I came out of law school and the only job offer I had on the table, it was at a big firm, but it was to be a litigator, meaning like putting on a suit and a tie and going into court and arguing with other psychopaths over things that don't matter. And it was so stressful that my body
not to throw shade at like more than half of all of the legal like field, but I mean, it's a very different, it's a different skill set, right? I feel like a lot of people go to law school, they only hear about litigation. They're like, I'm not cut out to be a lawyer. And definitely that was my experience when I went to law school. And so, not to throw shade at all litigators, different skill set, different needs,
different skill set. Yeah. I think, I think there's a dynamic where you're right. Like there are exceptions to every rule. I think it can sort of attract a sort of personality that thrives in conflict. And I think what I quickly discovered was I do not thrive in conflict at all, to the point where I started suffering from all kinds of like health problems and things that were like clearly the result of all the stress and anxiety of like just constantly being in conflict. And, I kept having this thing of like, I wasn't forming relationships with clients because as a litigator, they just kind of come in and out of your life. And as soon as the lawsuit's over, they're done with you.
Want nothing to do with you.
Yeah. And also like there was never any like win, like even if you'd win the lawsuit, the client wasn't really happy because they would rather just not have gotten sued or had to sue somebody in the first place. So start talking to some friends of mine who are transactional attorneys, and they were like, well, check this out. That's very different from what I do because my clients and I have years long relationships because I'm involved in, various aspects of their business and helping them along their journey. And also, as a transactional attorney, my job is to make deals happen. My job is to, figure out how to have, both sides walk away from the table feeling like they got more or less what they wanted and excited to work together. I'm like, God, that sounds so much healthier. So I convinced Perkins Coie to let me completely change my practice. And kudos to them. Like, we'll talk about it, but I think, big law, just like it didn't work out for Aravinda, it didn't really work out for me. But like, again, some credit has to be given here for, I don't think every big law firm would have just let a third year associate just suddenly change what they were going to do. But that was a huge change. And then, but much like Aravinda, I started running into the same obstacles of not really feeling like I was given time to service smaller, like earlier stage companies who really needed my help more than anybody else. And also, the lack of, resources and meaningful feedback, because everybody's so busy that there's almost a disincentive against like tutoring and mentoring and really training. So the way you learn at big law as a junior associate is often to just screw things up, press send and pray. And then when it comes back wrong, then, the partner or the senior associate throws you under the bus to the client. And then you've learned something. Congratulations. So I heard about SLS from a friend of mine. And I didn't think that I really, I had such low confidence at that point in my career. I really didn't think I was going to get the gig at all. But I went in there and I met some amazing people, like down to a person. Every single person I met was amazing, including Aravinda, especially. I just knew that we were going to vibe. I was like, God, I hope I get this gig. But even if not, I gotta like keep in touch with this person. And so, yeah, we worked there together for like 5 years. And then Aravinda spun out and did her own thing. And I guess, it's what we should probably talk about.
Yeah, let's get into that. So Aravinda, was it always in the cards for you to start your own firm, or was that because you saw a need that needed to be fulfilled?
Absolutely not what I thought that I would do. I hate admin work. So much of my life is now admin work. And I never really, honestly, too, like when I was at a big law firm, I could not imagine myself being a partner because the models for me were 100% male, almost no people of color, and their lives were kind of sad. They were just so much around work. They barely had time to sleep, to have interests, to spend time with their families. Most of them either had a stay-at-home mom or broken, like divorce. So, it was not, I couldn't see myself there. And then also was like, do I even really want to be there? I don't know. Probably not. So then I joined Silicon Legal and felt like, oh yeah, I could be a partner. Actually, that's surprising. That's a change. And I started being more motivated and sort of reaching out for that. And I became a partner. I was a partner there for 5 years. And while I loved it, I felt like something was missing and I didn't know what it was because on paper, I kind of made it. I was a partner at a law firm. The values, like the approach to the amount of work was appropriate and the approach to clients was really stellar. And, I was living comfortably. I was like, okay, so I'm here, but I just felt like something was missing. And so I started casting around for what that might be. And I also had really cared a lot about diversity. So as a partner there, I really made an outsized effort to recruit, mentor, retain. And when I left, we had one of the most diverse corporate practices I had ever encountered. So I felt really good about that. Then I thought, okay, let's give back to to our founder community. And I started these workshops and trainings on topics that if you're around other founders all the time, it's kind of, you talk about it, but if you're the first person in your community to do this sort of work, you don't know who to talk to. So I did like a training on what is dilution for a startup or what's the difference between debt and equity. And I wanted to fill these with our women, BIPOC, LGBTQIA founders. And like, I couldn't fill them with our own clients. These just were not there. And it was super shocking to me because I thought if you build it, they will come. And that was a lie. And so it made me think about, why is this the case? We have a very diverse firm. What's in the way? And I realized that like all boutique firms, we don't really do much outreach or marketing. Much of it is word of mouth. And the founder's a great guy. He's a straight white guy. So there's some diversity in his network, but it's limited. And, if we had somebody who would reach out, who'd heard about us, and we had somebody who had been referred and we were busy, we're always prioritizing the referred candidate or the referred client because it's just more of a known quantity. And every boutique law firm is basically operating this way.
Right.
So the end result, not out of ill intent or malice, but the end result is that diverse startups or people who are not in these networks tend to get worse legal counsel. They work with me at the big law firm, a junior associate who's inexperienced, doesn't have time for you, and is also very expensive. Or they're working with a lawyer who literally does not know what they're doing and is making mistakes all over the place, and the founder does not realize until it's too late. So, and then on top of all the other barriers and hurdles in place for diverse founders and emerging fund managers, I was like, I can't. So that was the motivation to start this law firm, to not just equalize and like give them access to really good legal, which I think they're deserving of more than anyone, like it goes a lot further as well for them. but also to kind of think of how we can approach this in a perspective that is for their benefit. That is not just a typical service provider doing a great job, maybe, but who's just kind of, okay, I'm the service provider. But to go a step further and think about how would an in-house counsel advise this client? And can we, because we're not about maximizing shareholder value, we're not about making the most money, because we have a mission, can we advise in a way that's more in line with our clients and more likely to help them be successful and more likely to help them unload the section of their brain that's low-key freaking out about legal at all times onto us so that they can free up that space to do stuff that they are amazing at. That's amazing. And you brought Michael along with you. I didn't. I'm going to be brutally honest here. Oh, okay. There was a little bit of friction when I left. I was, the woman of color partner leaving, and I was told after I was like, I'm looking for something else, that I was not a good manager. And, that was feedback I got. And I believed it because I had terrible managers. So I was like, well, that kind of tracks. I did not hire anybody from my firm as I left, which I'm sure they were delighted about. Because I also was like, I also don't know how this is going to work. What if I don't have enough clients? And then I've taken someone away from their working, from feeding their family, and now they're out on the street. Of course, that was like the paranoid fantasy I had. Immediately, I had way too much work, actually, and I totally needed to have hired someone. But I felt very insecure about that element of my management. So I did not reach out to people. And then I sort of soft reached out to Michael, who told me everything was just fine. And he was like loving it over there, which I then turned out was not exactly the truth.
I was trying to, this is like such a great dating story in a way, like, employer dating. Cause like, I knew that Aravinda was building this thing that was really focused on diversity and inclusion. And I know how important representation is and everything. And here I am, this straight cis white man, and so I didn't want to let her know that I wasn't happy, because I didn't want her to feel pressured to offer me a job. I was like, I know that I'm not on your, mission.
Like, I was like, how are things going? Tell me. And you're like, things are great. And my face fell.
Everything's
what
fine.
Changed? Because you were complaining definitely don't need a job. I'm good. Yeah. Yeah. It was kind of hilarious. So there was a little bit of a dance that took longer. And then,
no, what did it? As I was on your website, I was trolling your website, and I saw you hired a white dude, and I was like, wait, she's into that kind of diversity too? So Aravinda likes to tell everybody that I'm the diversity hire, and it's true.
It's true. He is the sole male and on the entire team.
Yeah.
This is not a sexism. I do think this mission draws a certain demographic of people who care about this stuff. And that does include Michael. Like, I have to say, Michael has checked me on my privilege and on my, unthinking sort of boss man mentality that I've absorbed from like the ether that we live in multiple times. So I would say, yeah, I mean, he was an amazing hire for the company, for me, for everyone. And he really represents what it means to be an ally.
Oh, how long has Ventures Council been around now? How many years?
The firm's almost 5 years old. It'll be 5 years old this summer. Yeah.
Awesome. Congratulations on that. And then, Michael, you just became a managing partner this year, correct?
I guess late last year.
Late last year. Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. So Michael, could you share the core values that drive Ventures Council and how these influence your approach to working with a diverse range of clients and startups?
Yeah, totally. And there's the, there's sort of the ethos and the guiding principles when it comes to our attorneys, but then there's also kind of somewhat more germane maybe to your interests and the kinds of things you talk about in your podcast. There's also the way we approach our team and having a totally different mindset there. But, for me, the idea of like working with, people who are, underestimated, underrepresented, undervalued, that have a hard time finding like trust relationships with especially, attorney, like a good attorney is such an important like tool to have when you're a startup founder and you're trying to make a go of everything, like avoiding all these like really expensive early mistakes, having some like perceived legitimacy, having your house in order when you go to talk to an investor, and just having the confidence to know, like, I know how to answer all these questions. I've got it all under control. When you're not really well networked in that way, then it's like, well, how do you learn this lingo? How do you learn to sort of code switch in this world? And like, I love the idea of us being sort of this gap filler that kind of like bridges between, me as this founder who has this brilliant idea, but I don't know anybody. I don't know how to talk to these kinds of people. I don't know the kinds of things they're going to ask me about, to feeling like, to feeling empowered, to being able to walk into that room with a VC, and really, really focus on their core value proposition rather than like getting pulled down some, ancillary matters that they don't really know how to answer. And so that really spoke to me. The idea of recruiting a team of people who had that same value set, and kind of, filtering out and having that be sort of the driving principle. Like, we've taken some risks on some of our hires, like we've brought in people who didn't necessarily have the like boilerplate, like came through big law and practiced, in the, emerging companies group for X number of years. And then like, because that's, what a lot of firms that are like us would do, is they'd require everybody to have that same cookie cutter background. But we've taken a few bets, and they've paid off massively. Because when you have people that are aligned with the mission and aligned with the values, they'll put in that extra effort. And and I found that too with myself, that whereas at my old job, a lot of times it felt like so much extra effort just to do sort of the bare minimum to like go through the motions and get stuff done. Whereas, at Venturous, ever since I've joined, and not to say Aravinda has us working around the clock or anything, but there are times when like I need to be on late, or I need to be responding to something off hours on the weekend. And it doesn't feel like a drag, because it feels like I'm actually doing something that's important. I know that the client is going to really appreciate what I'm doing. We get so much positive feedback from our clients, that like that, just keeps you going. That's what it's all about. And in terms of the way we approach staff and everything, I think we both had, and we can talk about it. I don't know how, we don't want to name names or anything, but we both had experiences, especially at big firms, less so at SLS. I think they're trying to move the ball in the direction of a more humane, work environment for law firms. I think there's some successes and some misses potentially there, but because we've had some like pretty traumatic stuff happen in the workplace in the past, like we really wanted to design an environment of full transparency around management and the decisions that we're making, like clear mechanisms to hold us to account. So our employees review and assess us every year, and we have to take that feedback and grow from it. And just, encouraging a culture of self-care, so that when we have people that are going through a hard time, whether it's health stuff or mental health stuff or other life circumstances, that they don't feel like, oh my God, I can't possibly step away from my job for a little while, or I'm gonna get fired, or I'm gonna be a drag on the rest of the team, or this and that. Like, it's, really trying to encourage this environment of having everyone understand that they're valuable at their best and they're valuable at their worst, because life gives you all kinds of things. And what we want are relationships both with clients and with our employees that last, for very long periods of time. And so it takes a lot of investment, but I find that really unique about Venturous Counsel. And it's part of one of the many things that I'm really proud of here.
How do you build those into the culture? Like, I mean, it's one thing to say it, to state it in your core values, but how do your people know that they can, you know what I mean? Like the balance you're talking about, like how do you ensure that on a daily, weekly, monthly basis?
I got to tell you, it's tough. And because we've been trained for so long that like people don't believe you if you tell them that. So the way to do it is to show, like, you do it yourself. you encourage other people when they mention something, you're like, please take the rest of the day off. There's like nothing urgent going on. When your boss is continually telling people to take time off, take the day off, take care of yourself. Sometimes we send little like care packages to people if they're sick, just something that shows that like we really care about the people.
And we do it ourselves. We model it. Like we take time off when we need it.
I have to say, though, that is probably the toughest part, because owning a business means that you do not get the same amount of disconnection from the business. And I would say like that's probably the area we got to work on the most. Mm-hmm. But in terms of like consistently the messaging with the team, and we have a fully remote team too. So, letting people know that it's okay to do whatever, and like mentioning, I actually like going to the sauna and I go in the middle of the day. And I will tell people I'm going to be out for like an hour and a half. I'm going to go bike to the sauna, go to the sauna, come back and, shower and come back. And so if you need me during that time, I'm on the cell phone number, text me, call me, whatever. But, I'm going to be out of pocket for at least half an hour during that time. I'm not going to go if we're closing a financing that's like right in the midst of it. I'm not going to, but if there's space, I can go, I can communicate with the team. And that is this small way in which we're modeling to other team members that they can be out of pocket. We trust them. Once you extend the trust to the employees of like, I believe that you can manage your own time. You'll get the stuff done. You're a conscientious person who cares about this stuff, and you're a good person, and I trust you. Then the trust gets reflected back. Then it starts building this sort of cycle. That's my opinion.
Awesome. So, you mentioned that you're fully remote. And so I guess actually so do you guys even meet with your clients remotely, or do you travel to them, or is there a mix of that? I would imagine just in a traditional law office, you would have an office that, people come to, and I'd love to know more about that, how you operate.
So I will tell you, this was something I hipstered this remote working as a law firm thing.
Dude, doing it before it was cool.
Pre-pandemic. Yeah. And the reality was, to be completely honest, at my prior firm, we were in this like fine office space, but it was like, okay. And it wasn't huge. And the manager really wanted to grow. So they changed offices and they doubled the size, and the price was, the rental market had increased. So the price, so it's a 4x increase in rent. Mm-hmm. And the clients that came in that December were like the most terrible clients I've ever had to work with, including at the big law firm. It was so horrendous. And I was like, this really, and it really changed the tenor of what it felt like they were doing. And I felt like a holdout. I was like, what about the old days? Like I was okay working a little less and making a little less and having everybody kind of, and it really changed the tenor of everything. And I understood that it was because of a very real economic liability on our books that we had to make sure that we were making enough to offset. And that was when I decided I'm not going to have an office in the new firm. I'm not going to put that stress on myself. I'm going to keep the rates even lower for the clients so we can reach more people who really need the service. And I'm going to be fully remote. And that means that I can hire talent from anywhere, which will vastly increase like the pool of folks that we can draw from and increase the talent. And that has been the case. So it was a conscious decision. And the good thing is with startups, like they're also very cost conscious and they're also very busy. Yeah. So I will say that since at this firm, I meet with clients much more often than I did at my prior firm, and definitely when I was at the big law firm. And that's because it's so easy to meet with them remotely. And of course, if they're in town, we try and connect, or if I travel somewhere, I'm checking to see what clients are local that I can see. But it's more opportunistic because we already have these strong established relationships from calls and Zooms and very robust email communications.
Nice. And how's it for you, Michael? Were you remote before, or is it this is kind of your first?
I was sort of a hybrid, and okay. I think having kids really flipped it for me. things at my old firm were pretty flexible, where it was like, we're not a big FaceTime shop. We do kind of want people in the office because, as Aravinda mentioned, we're paying a huge amount to maintain it. So if everyone could please come here from time to time, that'd be great. And they did a really good job of like having enough like cool stuff happening in the office that you kind of wanted to be there. But I don't remember. I'm like,
was there a ping pong table?
We didn't. That's weird. Why didn't we have a ping pong table? Not even a foosball, man. Anyway, I remember maybe twice ever clients actually coming in, like, because that's the thing, like even in the before times, like clients just, especially startup clients, they don't have time to like come into a law office and sit down at a conference table. Like, it's like, who cares? What are we doing? Just let's get the thing done.
Yeah.
So, for me, what flipped, was, I had my son, he's about to turn 5. And he was born exactly 1 year before the pandemic happened. And just having him, suddenly, like, my center of gravity shifted, and I wanted to be home more. Like, there were all these milestones that were happening, and I would be at work and I'd be like missing it. And it did become a little bit of a friction point at my old firm that I was like less present in the office. And so I felt this pressure to kind of keep showing up. And then I don't know if you heard, but there was this like pandemic, like this virus that just like spread everywhere. So then like everyone just was at home. So I was like, oh, well, okay, this is awful for the world. But as the parent of a child who's about to take his first steps, this is great. So in April of 2020, my son took his first step, and I was home to witness it because we were all working from home. But after that, like, after about a year of that, and it was painful at first, like working remote. I think a lot of people experienced that. Like at first it was a little bit.
Trying to manage your household with the small children and just like schools and
and having your personal and your business life just bleed into each other, and they're not feeling like there were any boundaries. It was crazy at first. But I would say after 3 or 4 months, it kind of, that all settled, and I got good systems in place, and I felt like, okay, this is sustainable. And that's when I knew, like, I just don't think I'm going back to an office. And I was like, if someone tries to make me, then we're gonna have some words. So I think it's great. I think working remote is for jobs where it's even a possibility. I think it's fantastic. There are ways to make sure that the team is still connected and in sync with each other. I will say I interact more with my team members at VC on a daily basis than I did at my old firm when I was in the physical office. Really? And the quality of those interactions is higher too.
Quality, I think it's a lot higher, because it's more intentional.
It's more intentional. Yeah. It's not just the drive by, although we do have time for informal hangouts, and we do sort of these, we do like team activities that are they're remote as well. But it's, so there is, I don't want to say that like you can just go fully remote and that's just fine, and you don't need to be very intentional and conscious about building a workplace culture. I think that's really important. It's essential.
And we do a once a year retreat. And my goal is to get the firm to the profitability level that we could do twice a year. That's my like very intense economic goal for the firm. Because I do think there is something really amazing that happens when people are together. And honestly, our retreat is just fun. Like there's very little programming. It's really so that people can hang out and connect. And there's a huge karaoke component. Like even people who don't normally karaoke are all like they're event. Dressed up in like crazy outfits, and like they bring like wigs and like money, guns, and I mean it's
fun.
It's very awesome.
Yeah. So you guys get away to do that somewhere? Is that
So we last 2 years we've gone to Santa Rosa nearby here. And
we fly in the folks that are out of state, and we all spend a weekend staying in a mansion together.
Yeah. So like people fly in probably like Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we're hanging out, and then people fly back on Sunday. So it's expensive. We're not working for clients. We're not making money during that time. Right. But it's so valuable for team cohesion, and it's really fun.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, you touched on kind of that whole being a parent. You guys are both parents, right? And so
2 kids each.
Yours are a little bit older, Aravinda, right? You got
three and 8.
Oh, that's right. You got the 3-year-old.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot of companies that are forcing people to come back into the office. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that there is an element where if you're really junior, it's hard to get access to the more senior people. You're not on projects with them. And that being in the office is part of like a very junior person's social network. Like they're trying to build it that way. So I do think it's tougher for super junior folks. We're lucky in that our model is that we hire folks who have some experience and may need some training, but they're not fresh out of law school or paralegal degree or whatever. So I do think there's an element there, but I think forcing people in is just, I don't know. I mean, some people love it. Some people do want to be in the office every day, and that's great for them. And for folks who have other centers of gravity, as Michael was saying, like their family, I also have parents whose health is not great. And I need to maximize all the time I can to spend with families on both sides. A lot of people are in the sandwich generation situation. For folks like that, you kind of have to be very careful about not assuming that you understand the lived experience of everyone else. And any situation where somebody is found like a good group. I mean, profitability was high when people were working remote. A lot of people had a lot of fatigue, and there are other issues where, there are ways to improve on it. But it's not clear to me that overall companies do better when everyone's in the office. But I do think there's a lot of real estate. There's a lot of feeling that, it's easy to create culture when you're in the office. And I don't even know that all of that is true, but I think that's driving a lot of these decisions.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with all that. I mean, I think, if there's a specific case or there's a specific reason why you're requiring people to do that, I mean, I can understand there's some workplaces, especially, we have startup clients and some of them want people to be in person, and there's circumstances where it makes sense because everything's highly collaborative. It needs to happen in real time. You need to have people in a room kind of spitball and throwing ideas off of each other in real time. It's not like what we do where, I'm going to delegate a project to someone. They're going to take a first draft on their own, and then I'm going to review it and give it, where it's like, it's sort of a little more linear and each person's task can be discreetly broken out.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I can understand, but it's, I think it's a lot easier to show people the value of working in person and try to pull them in versus just requiring the stick is just less effective than the carrot in those situations. And I do think, the cat's kind of out of the bag on this, and people have seen the value of remote work and the way that it can transform their lives. And I think employers that aren't at least open to some kind of a hybrid situation, if not fully remote, maybe they're doing okay right now because it's more of sort of, the leverage is more on the employer side, but eventually that's going to shift and the economy is going to come back a little bit more and workers are going to have a little bit more of the leverage. And then all those companies that shoved people back into the office who didn't want to be in the office are going to start to see a bunch of attrition. So it's a risk long-term.
Going back to the diversity of your clients, and clearly that's what your firm stands for. You mentioned before, how the clients didn't really reflect the diversity and the change that was happening at SLS. How do you ensure that it's happening here at Venturous?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I would say representation matters, but it's not everything. As shown by Michael, who is an amazing ally and really, has a moral compass that I envy. And so it really is around it's important that there is some representation or that there intends to be representation and that the values are aligned. I would say that's even in some ways more important. And you had mentioned how do you create this relationship of trust with your employees and everything? It's really hard to import later. I think it has to come from the beginning. And the same is around core values of the company around something like diversity. And statistically, it has been shown that more diverse teams create better products that sell for more, that companies that are more diverse, the acquisitions have higher value points when there are women on boards. There's all these statistics that show that it's a good that it's just good business sense. But it's really easy when you're in a startup to move fast and break things and just hire everybody who's around you that looks the same as you, that's already in your network. It's easier and quicker and cheaper and faster. And that is how startups make so many of their decisions, because they're like, we just got to get momentum and then we can move and then we can decide. But and it's harder not only to like think outside the box and find diverse candidates, although I don't know how hard that really is, but like, it's harder than just hiring the people that you hang out with and, play golf with or whatever. But it's also, there's more friction in an environment that has more diverse perspectives, which creates a better product, but also is more friction that you have to manage. So it's tougher on two levels, which means that there has to be a strong commitment and belief that that is an overall benefit and that is worth the effort at the beginning. And so I have in our pitch conversations where, we're pitching the client, I'm also having the client kind of pitch me on this values alignment, because to be honest, we're a limited quantity. We had a 4-month waiting list year before last when we sort of built up the team. So it's a limited resource, and I'm careful about making sure that we're using it for the people that are going to maximize the mission, which is to have there be more successful, diverse startups out there making decisions, using their power, representing more of the world.
Was there ways, like, I guess, since you were working with startups before, and then you have your startup, were there lessons learned that you were able to implement? Yeah. I'm sure.
There's so much empathy, so much more empathy. I thought I had so much empathy, but man, when you have to I would tell clients, just pick some name and we can always change it later. And I'm like, are you kidding? I'm gonna have to get a new website. I'm gonna have to change the email. I am not going to start this firm until I decide what the name is. And it took me a month. It took me a month to like F around and figure it out. And, I feel really good, even though the name is very long, which is also the case for my own personal name. And I should have learned a little bit, but whatever, I still like it. And, I definitely, I'm able to approach the clients with a level of lived experience empathy that I think, tempers the advice I give, and just, I think it helps it land a little more securely with the client as well, a little more. They're able to receive it, I think, sometimes a little more.
How do you go beyond just fulfilling diversity quotas to genuinely cultivating an inclusive environment, both within the firm and with your clients?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned we're not about diversity quotas at all. Like, it's more about the values alignment and ensuring that there's just that. It's a company that has this in the DNA and in the values and in the core pillars, that cares about this priority, this value, that will end up being like successful. And for us, it was never, I had no parameters. I was not trying to set out to hire anyone in any specific way. And it just so happened that the people that are drawn to this mission end up being diverse. So actually, I was lazy. I was able to be lazy about it and just, but I do think if you are able to look in groups, for example, like engineers, if you look in like groups like, lesbians who tech, or there are a bunch of Black technology groups. If you look in and recruit from those groups, you're not only strengthening your own company by having a more diverse team, oftentimes too, you're hiring people who actually execute very well, but are not as in high demand as people who are more who are more majority representative. And so it's a win-win. In my perspective. But again, it takes that extra thought, it takes the time, it takes the effort to kind of figure out where to recruit from. And so there's more friction in the beginning, but man, the payout is really high in the end. And it's not like only recruit from there, but like include it. And then if this person, especially in tasks where you can do a test. So Michael was saying, a lot of law firms only hire from other big law trained. I actually saw this at my prior workplace, and we wouldn't hire any junior associates. We just wouldn't do it because we were like, we just don't think they're going to be trained. And I was like, well, why don't we test that? Because by the time you're at mid-level, a lot of the women and people of color have left law because it's terrible. Okay. And they don't have the same systems or resources to be able to withstand the terribleness. So I instituted an assessment that we give junior associates. Now we give it to everybody just to make sure. And there's a 5th year at Wilson Sonsini that failed our assessment. I mean, doesn't necessarily mean the other way of doing it is not great either. But especially if you're in a situation where you can skills test, then you really can identify, you can set the net wide and then create this filter that is can you do this task that we will need you to do? Or, can you learn this thing? And that's going to give you such better information about what this person's going to be like, what work product they can create. And that's, I think that's a really nice equalizing and sort of values aligning both the company's interests and, society's interests in having these workplaces be more diverse.
Mm-hmm. Well, time has flown by. Is there anything we missed that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I'll say that I didn't emphasize as much is when you find, and Michael talked maybe a little more about it, but when you find a purpose or something that is beyond the day-to-day that's driving your work, and it's obviously going to be different for every person. And it takes a while, like it took me many, many years of working to figure out what that was for me. Mm-hmm. But man, and as I mentioned, lots of admin work, more hours spent on this work than before. My husband is like, this is 100% a bait and switch. You totally told me you'd be working less. You lied to my face. Even so, I'm so much happier, and the work doesn't feel as much like work, and I feel fulfilled, and I love this team, and I love the clients, and my level of life satisfaction has increased so dramatically from this relatively small change. I'm doing the same work I've been doing for 17 years. I'm working with the same clientele, doing the same sort of work. But this small sort of perspective change has just increased my job satisfaction and my life satisfaction so much. The sooner you can do this, the sooner you can figure it out. And it's okay to change as well, right? It doesn't invalidate if you find something else that's interesting. But once you have the basics of whatever you're doing down, a few years in whatever career you kind of want to pursue, or it varies depending on the career. If you can figure out what this is, man, you're just going to have so much more life satisfaction and joy. And that's that's what we're here for, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
In addition to the impact you're going to make, on top of that, just purely selfishly, this is what I would say. That is work that's worth doing for yourself to figure out what that is for you.
Absolutely.
Man.
Couldn't agree more. Michael, any last words?
Yeah, it's tough to top that. I mean, I echo 100% of that. And I just, I don't know who all is listening to this kind of thing, but I think it can be overwhelming trying to find your way in the world and trying to figure out the thing that's for you and that aligns with you. And there can be this big pressure to have that be the thing that you're earning your living at, right? It's you might find your passion, but it's something that doesn't pay anything. Mm-hmm. And so, I feel really fortunate to be someone who's found a way to earn a living doing something that I'm really passionate about. But I think the takeaway for me has been, number one, to be patient and give time, and to just be of service to other people. Because what I have found is that when you're always putting yourself out there and you're always making yourself available and you're always investing in other people, and that's just kind of your default, these things have a way of coming back around, and opportunities have a way of finding their way back to you. And so, when you can approach these relationships, people introduce us to potential clients all the time, and we quickly discover oh, they're not really a good fit for us. But we take the time and we meet with them, we talk with them, and we help them find the attorneys that really are right for them. Mm-hmm. And we do that with no expectation it's ever going to come back to us in any way. Routinely, however, it does. Mm-hmm. Because when you just constantly trying to invest in other people, people will invest in you. So that's what I hope people take away. Invest in other people.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. And the work you do is amazing. If people want to learn more about Ventures Council, where should they go? Where do you guys hang out? Not physically, like LinkedIn.
remotely.
Remotely.
Yeah, we are on LinkedIn. We're somewhat active on LinkedIn. Honestly, it would just go to the website, venturouscouncil.com, which is a lot of letters, I'll be honest, but venturouscounsel.com. Reach out to us, send an email or connect with us on LinkedIn. Those are probably the two best ways.
Yeah. Even if what you're looking for isn't aligned with what we do, we're always happy to help people find the right resource.
I'll be honest, I was so busy when I first started the firm. I didn't do as much of the outreach and content and, basic resources for free that I want just people to have, like this PSA about Clerky. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be doing little video segments that explain common questions, confusions, misconceptions in startup from a legal lens and in a way that's really bite-sized and accessible. So stay tuned for those. Those will be cool.
Awesome. Perfect.
Oh, the other thing I'm going to say, if you've just started out, you have barely any money and you want to create an entity, use nothing but Clerky. Do not use LegalZoom. Even Strike Atlas.
What is it?
Clerky, Clerky.
I swear to God, they're not paying me or anything.
Okay. I have no relationship with them.
I'm so sick of clients coming to me thinking they save money by creating something, but it's a platform that doesn't understand the basics of what's needed for a company that's going to go raise venture angel investment. And then we got to fix it. So then they paid twice what they would have had to have paid. They just did it right the first time. So Clerky is the only online platform we've used or we've seen where we don't have to mess with the formation documents. And it's just I want a PSA from the rooftops because it's the most annoying money you'll ever spend is fixing something that you paid the wrong person to do, right? That's basically what this is. So that's the one PSA to the startup community.